From studios at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, this is Fourth and State. In this edition, Sherrie Tussler of the Hunger Task Force talks about the new face of hunger in Milwaukee and what we can do about it. I'm David Haynes. I'm the editorial page editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and I'm joined today by Sherrie Tussler, who's the executive director of Hunger Task Force for Milwaukee. And Sherrie has been meeting with the U.S. Department of Agriculture this week to start a summer program for meals. So we're going to talk to her about that. Sherrie, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. I wonder if you could just, before we get into the summer program, though, are we doing enough to solve the hunger problem in Milwaukee?
I think we're doing an awful lot, but there still is a lot more that can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Hunger Task Force was established in 1974, and we were a task force, and we still exist some 35 years later. I think that the community can respond to hunger, and lots of volunteers and people do, but it does take changes in social policy to truly end hunger in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm. And Hunger Task Force is doing a whole lot more things now than you were doing all those years ago, right?
Yeah, I think people typically think of us as a food bank.
Right, and that's not the case, really.
Well, we are food banking, very clearly. We banked 10 million pounds of food last year. We supported 80 local charities. We target a supply of free and local food to food banks, food pantries, soup kitchens, and homeless shelters. But feeding people today really doesn't end future hunger. And the way we end future hunger is by providing access to food in an equal and reasonable way to people who have little or no money for the purchase of food.
Well, let's talk about that, because the summer program that Kevin Concannon, Undersecretary for USDA, is in town, and USDA is helping to sort of set this up. The signs are going up this week. Explain what that program is and how it will work, how many kids it will reach.
Sure. The Undersecretary is in town, joining our local partners, the public schools, the youth service organizations, and the meals providers to kick off or celebrate the beginning of the summer. And typically what happens is childhood hunger increases. First, at the very beginning part of summer, when school releases, children no longer have breakfast and lunch or even supper that's provided by the public schools. And then later in August, when recreation programs, academic programs like summer school end, children lose access.
There's a gap there before school starts again.
It's a huge gap, sometimes as early as August 5th, and then throughout the course of August, depending upon where Labor Day lands, that's when school starts back up again. And so many children rely on those programs, they end up going hungry. And what we were seeing historically was children visiting soup kitchens that were intended for homeless adults, unaccompanied, looking for food. And so we organized and rallied the public schools. We got permission to keep the school doors open. We found partners in the Milwaukee Center for Independence, Heart Love Place, and the Social Development Commission who actually create the meals that are provided in our parks, at our Boys and Girls Clubs, our Y programs, and some of the youth service organizations that are smaller here in town. And what we've done as an organization is coordinate all of that effort. And then in order to make it really work, we had to find some funding. And Kohl's department stores generously provided $500,000 to fund programs to stay open so that those meals could then be served.
So that gap in August would be filled this year. And about how many kids do you think you'll serve this year?
It's tough to count kids, but it's easy to count meals.
Okay.
We're anticipating anywhere between 800,000 and 1 million meals this summer.
And that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah,
right?
Kohl's
5 days a week.
has agreed to provide supper. We call it Serving Up Supper for Kids. The federal program only allows breakfast and lunch to be reimbursable, and supper is very much needed in so many neighborhoods throughout the city, and so Kohl's is reimbursing that supper meal.
And when will the meals start?
We're going to be starting around June 20th, but the key for anybody who's watching is to call 211. There'll be an automated attendant, and you simply push your zip code into your phone, and you will get a recording of the 6 closest locations near your home.
Okay, 211, remember that.
That's an easy one.
There are something like 46 million people on what was known as the food stamp program, now called SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Program, and that's a record number. I'm assuming that's the same in Wisconsin and in Milwaukee, that we're at record levels. How have you seen the faces of hunger change over the past few years as we've gone through the recession?
We have staff who work at the welfare office. We're on the south side at the Robles Center, as well as COGS and UMOS. And so we've got about 10 people who are actually working, helping people apply for food stamp benefits. And I think of them as the walking wounded. You see people who are sort of dazed, and they've got a big pile of paperwork in their hand, and they're looking at the signs, and they don't know what to do. Low-income people who have consistently been low income understand how to apply for food stamps, how to get Badger Care, how to get Wisconsin Shares, which is our child care program. People who are new to being poor, people who have lost their jobs, are not only scared and offended, and they have a really hard time. It's not dignified to have to apply for public benefits. And so it's really obvious when you see them the first time. You take them by the hand and you show them how, and you reassure them that everything's going to be okay. And ultimately, we hope the economy improves. But right now, in our state, 830,000 individuals are using the food stamp program. It's called Food Share here in Wisconsin. And locally here in Milwaukee, we're about 94% enrolled. And so the eligible population is very much enrolled in Milwaukee County.
And how many of those are kids?
Half.
About half.
About half.
Okay.
Almost all of those federal nutrition programs, like food stamps, half of the population is going to be children, and most of those children are going to be younger than 12.
So what can the average person do, somebody who's doing fairly well, who isn't hungry, what can the average person do to help?
We remind people all the time that we're running food drives, and so they can volunteer to either participate in a food drive or donate a food drive. As the course of the summer unfolds, we'll be at Summerfest, we'll be at the Wisconsin State Fair, we'll be at almost every ethnic festival collecting food, so always bring a few canned or dry items with you. People can donate online to help at Hunger Task Force if they want to write a check and purchase some food, or if they want to volunteer. There's plenty of volunteer opportunities. We're going to be working in the schools this summer. We'll be surveying the children and the parents to figure out what works and what doesn't. We've got lots of food sorting going on from the food that we collected from the letter carriers food drive. People can get involved, and it's important to realize that hunger relief really is volunteer-based. 90% of the pantries that are located here in Milwaukee County are run solely by volunteers.
And why don't you give your website and your phone number?
Sure, it's hungertaskforce.org, which is pretty simple.
Yep.
And our phone number is 777-0483.
Okay, well, Sherrie Tussler, thanks so much for being with us. We urge anyone who can to help out this summer. Tune in next time for another edition of 4th and State.